Can federal courts block a president's executive orders? The U.S. Constitution creates a system of checks and balances to prevent any branch of government from becoming too powerful. One of the key questions in this system is, can federal courts prevent a president from carrying out an executive order? The court's authority over executive orders. Federal courts have the power to block, limit, or overturn an executive order if it violates the Constitution or exceeds presidential authority. This power is a crucial part of maintaining the balance between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. How can courts block an executive order? 1. Injunctions and temporary restraining orders. If a lawsuit is filed against an executive order, a judge can temporarily halt it while the courts review its legality. Example: in 2017, federal courts blocked parts of President Trump's travel ban before a revised version was upheld by the Supreme Court. 2. Judicial review. Courts can declare an executive order unconstitutional if it contradicts existing laws or violates rights. 10. Example: in Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company v. Sawyer, 1952, the Supreme Court struck down President Truman's order to seize steel mills during the Korean War, ruling he had overstepped his authority. 3. Defining executive power limits. Courts can interpret whether an executive order exceeds the powers granted to the president. Example: in State of Washington v. Trump, 2017, a federal court blocked an immigration-related executive order, ruling that it lacked legal justification. Limits on court authority. Courts cannot block an executive order before it is issued. They must wait for a legal challenge. The Supreme Court has the final say. However, cases can take years to reach that level. Deference to national security orders. Courts may hesitate to block orders related to military action or foreign affairs. What happens if the president ignores a court order? If the executive branch refuses to comply with a federal court ruling, several consequences can follow. 1. Contempt of court. Officials who disobey a court order may face fines or even jail time. Say in example: if a judge orders an agency to stop enforcing an illegal executive order and officials ignore it, they could be held in contempt. 2. Congressional action. Impeachment. If the president personally refuses to comply, Congress could begin impeachment proceedings for violating the Constitution. Defunding. Congress could cut funding to any agency that refuses to follow a court ruling. Example: in United States v. Nixon, 1974, the Supreme Court ordered President Nixon to release the Watergate tapes. Had he refused, Congress might have impeached him sooner. 3. Criminal prosecution. After leaving office. A sitting president is generally protected from criminal charges, but other executive officials who ignore a court ruling can face prosecution for obstruction of justice, up to 20 years in prison; failure to obey a court order, civil or criminal contempt; abuse of power, potential legal liability after leaving office. 4. Federal law enforcement intervention. Federal courts can order U.S. Marshals to enforce rulings. Example: during the Civil Rights era, federal courts ordered school desegregation, and U.S. Marshals were sent to protect black students when state officials refused to comply. 5. Constitutional crisis. Worst-case scenario. If a president outright ignores both the courts and Congress, the nation could face a constitutional crisis. An example: President Andrew Jackson reportedly ignored the Supreme Court's ruling in Worcester v. Georgia, 1832, saying, "John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it." However, modern government systems make such defiance much riskier today. What comes next? The courts and Congress play crucial roles in checking presidential power, but they are not the only forces at work. How do federal agencies themselves enforce, resist, or interpret executive actions? What happens when agencies refuse to carry out presidential directives? Stay tuned for the next article in this series, where we'll explore the role of federal agencies in executing, or resisting, presidential policies.